Hey everyone! Tron Legacy has been out for quite some time, and many people have done tutorials on the Tron text effect, but since Photoshop CS6 is fresh out of the oven, I figured I'd take a shot at recreating the logo using Photoshop CS6's new and improved 3D functionality. Before we get going, if you prefer written tutorials or you want to download the end result that you see here, check out the post on iceflowstudios.com for the PSD file and the link to the font that I'm using for this design. Let's begin. Starting off with our document, I'm starting with a 1280 by 720 pixel document with a very dark blue background. Using a dark background will help your final text pop. However, you don't want to use a pure black background as it will cause issues when you're adding the final outer glow. Now for the text. Over at dafont.com they have several Tron style fonts, but the one I found most accurate was called TR2N. I'll link the font over at iceflowstudios.com. With the font of your choice active, a nice large size around 400 points should work nicely. Now go ahead and type out the word of choice anywhere on your document. You can always move it later if needed. Once your text is ready to go, under the 3D menu at the top of your workspace, choose the new 3D extrusion from selected layer option. This will convert your text into a 3D layer as you can see here. Now the fun begins. We're going to go through the different elements in the 3D panel which will slowly form the effect that we're looking for. Let's start with our infinite light. All we want to do with this light is rotate it downwards using the handle in the middle so it's almost directly facing the text. And then we're going to crank up the softness of the shadow in the properties panel to 60%. Good, now hopping over to the environment properties, the only setting that we're going to adjust is the reflections. To allow the text to reflect on the ground plane, turn the reflections opacity up to 60% and the roughness up to 5%, just to ensure that the reflections aren't too sharp. Of course, if you're looking for sharp reflections, keep the roughness at 0. Now moving down to the main mesh of our text layer, we need to add a bevel to the edges of our text. This can be done by selecting bevel from the shape preset picker. We're also going to decrease the extrusion to around 50. At this point the bevel isn't complete. To give the text a little bit of depth and to help with the eventual glows, we need to adjust the text's cap. At the top of the properties panel, the third icon will allow you to do just that. Increasing the width to 100% will create a nice bevel on our text. Now that we've dealt with the outline of the text, it's time to start working on the materials. Due to the nature of this font, our front and back inflation materials are covered up by the bevel, so the only materials that we need to change are the front bevel and the extrusion material. However, just to be safe, go ahead and click on the front and the back inflation materials and set the opacity of both of them to 0%. Let's start with the front bevel. Starting at the top with the diffuse color, set that at a pure black. We're actually going to be using illumination to define the color of this text. The specular can stay the same, but the illumination, which will give us a much stronger overall fill than diffuse would, will be set at a nice baby blue. I'm going to use the value 4F A3 F9. Now as for the sliders, all we want to change is the shine and the bump. Go ahead and increase the shine to 75% and reduce the bump to 0. And that's it for the front bevel. Now the extrusion will be slightly more work. Let's start at the top with the colors again. The diffuse will be set to a bright blue. I'm going to use 0090FF. The specular, which is actually going to help bring out the bump's texture, will be a nice baby blue. 00BBFF. And the illumination will be set to a slightly darker blue. 234F92. Now down below, the shine will be set to 30%, the reflection and the bump will be both at 100%, and the opacity will be at 30% as well. Now in terms of the bump's texture, it's really up to you how you want this to look. Over at cgtextures.com, I found a really nice scratch texture which will give us a nice glassy or icy feel to the extrusion. But even after the texture's been added, it still needs a little bit of tweaking. First off, because bump maps work off light and dark tones, we're going to quickly edit this texture. Clicking to the right of the percentage, choosing Edit Texture will allow us to edit the original file. All we really need to do is pump up the contrast. Heading up to the Image menu, down to Adjustments, and then choosing Brightness and Contrast, I'm going to start by turning on Legacy Mode, and then turn up the contrast to around 70. Now the reason I turned on Legacy Mode is because in recent versions of Photoshop, you can only increase the contrast to the point before the tones in the image start to become ruined. But in this case we want to go beyond that, which is exactly what Legacy allows us to do. Now that the contrast has been increased, save your document with your Command or Control S shortcut and hop back over to your document. The next tweak that we're going to make to the bump's texture is in regards to the UV map. This will ensure that our texture wraps nicely around the text. This time, go ahead and select the Edit UV Properties option. When the window pops up, set the U scale at 1000% and the V scale at 10%. Let's give our text a render to see how things are looking. You're going to notice, especially in regards to the reflection on the ground plane, that during the first few passes you may see a lot of noise and roughness. It won't be until the 4th or 5th pass that your elements will start to smooth out nicely. Once the render slows down, you know you've hit the crucial point. You're also going to notice something missing. Nothing's glowing. I figured instead of driving myself insane and attempting to create a glowing effect using Photoshop's 3D features, it'll be just as effective to add them using layer styles. So now that our render is complete, hop into your Layer Styles dialog box, and we're going to start with an inner glow. The color of this glow will be a very light blue, almost white. EB F7FF. The opacity will be set to 100% and the blend mode to vivid light. Now down below, setting the technique to precise will allow the glow to follow the curves of the text more accurately, and then set the source to center. In terms of the size and range values, this depends on the size of your text. For this example, a size of 5 and a range of 30 works well, but if you chose to use a larger or smaller font, you may need to tweak the values. And finally, let's add an outer glow to finish off the design. This time the color will be a more neutral blue, 0C75D7, with the blend mode set to linear dodge. And down below, set the size at 50 and the range to 100. And that should do it. Your own Tron-style text using Photoshop CS6's new 3D features and a touch of layer styles. Again, if you want to download the final PSD file or check out other Photoshop tutorials, check out iceflowstudios.com. Take care.